What if the loudest action movie of the 1980s was actually hiding something quieter, darker, and far stranger beneath the explosions? Predator, 1987, wasn't just a muscle-bound jungle action film. It was a production war against heat, confusion, broken effects, studio panic, and an ending so unsettling it was quietly buried. What audiences saw was control. What happened behind the camera was chaos. Today, we're breaking it open. This is 20 Weird Facts About Predator, 1987. Banned secret ending and hidden truths. They tried to hide. Stay sharp, watch closely, and let's begin. The original creature completely failed on camera. It wasn't terrifying, it was embarrassing. The first Predator design arrives on set, looking powerful on paper. On camera, it collapses. The creature moves awkwardly. Its proportions read as clumsy, not threatening. Test footage sends shockwaves through the production. What audiences didn't know is that weeks of shooting suddenly mean nothing. Scenes already filmed become unusable. The studio halts progress. This isn't a minor tweak. It's a full collapse of the film's core concept. Not suspense, but confusion. Not menace, but distraction. The jungle remains. The actors remain. The monster does not. And without a convincing hunter, Predator has no identity at all. Filming stops while the movie is rewritten in panic. Production doesn't slow, it stops. Sets sit idle. Call sheets vanish. Crew members wait with no answers. The script undergoes emergency changes because the original creature dictated blocking, framing, and pacing. Without it, nothing works. This isn't normal revision, it's survival writing. What audiences didn't know is that Predator nearly becomes a very different film. Less mystery, more conventional action, just to avoid restarting entirely. But fear wins. The studio chooses risk over retreat. They scrap the creature, start again, and gamble that the audience will never sense how close the film came to imploding. Jean-Claude Van Damme was originally inside the suit. Yes, really. Before the redesign, a young Jean-Claude Van Damme is cast to perform the creature. His athletic movement is meant to give the Predator elegance and speed. Instead, it creates problems. The suit limits motion. The camera can't capture his style. Frustration erupts. Not chemistry, but conflict. Van Damme exits the project quietly, and his involvement disappears from promotion entirely. What audiences didn't know is that the Predator's physical language, the slow, deliberate menace we now associate with it, only exists because this earlier approach fails completely. The monster had to lose grace to gain fear. Stan Winston redesigns the Predator under extreme time pressure. The rescue arrives fast and late. Stan Winston is brought in to save the film, and he has almost no time. Concept art turns into fabrication at breakneck speed. This isn't refinement, it's invention under fire. What audiences didn't know is that iconic details, the mandibles, the mask, the silhouette, are born from urgency, not long-term planning. Not perfection, but instinct. Not committee decisions, but gut reactions. The Predator's final form exists because there was no time left to overthink it. And sometimes, pressure doesn't break creativity, it sharpens it. The jungle heat pushes the cast to physical limits. The jungle doesn't look oppressive, it is oppressive. Day after day, actors work in extreme heat. Equipment overheats, bodies struggle, energy drains faster than expected. What audiences didn't know is that exhaustion becomes part of performance. This isn't acting fatigue, it's real depletion. The sweat is not staged, the breathing is not controlled. Not comfort, but endurance. The environment strips away polish and leaves raw movement behind. And that authenticity seeps into every frame, even when the camera isn't meant to capture it. The film begins as one genre, and quietly becomes another. The opening promises something familiar. Explosions, confidence, clear enemies, then the rules break. What audiences didn't know is how carefully this shift is engineered. The first act plays like a standard action film on purpose. Then the hunt begins. Not dominance, but vulnerability. Not control, but uncertainty. By the time viewers realize the tone has changed, they're already trapped in it. Predator isn't just about strength failing. It's about certainty collapsing. The invisibility effect is revolutionary and fragile. The Predator's cloaking isn't easy. It requires precise optical work, frame alignment, and patience that the production barely has. Small mistakes ruin entire shots. What audiences didn't know is how many takes are lost to technical failure. The effect looks effortless. It isn't. Not magic, but math. Not illusion, but discipline. The invisibility becomes a storytelling weapon because it's unreliable, forcing the filmmakers to frame scenes more creatively. Limitations don't weaken the film. They define it. The predator's vision is carefully restricted. Heat vision seems simple. It isn't. The filmmakers deliberately limit what the predator can see to maintain suspense. Full clarity would end the tension too quickly. What audiences didn't know is that rules are written for the monster just as strictly as for the humans. Not omniscient, but selective. Not unstoppable, but constrained. The predator's power only works because it has blind spots. And those blind spots give the audience hope. The jungle becomes a psychological space. By the midpoint, the jungle stops being a location. It becomes a mental maze. What audiences didn't know is how deliberately backgrounds are repeated to create disorientation. Trees blur together. Landmarks vanish. Not geography, but confusion. Not space, but pressure. The environment mirrors the character's unraveling certainty. They aren't just being hunted. They're being erased. The famous, "You're one ugly" line almost doesn't exist. Improvisation slips through the cracks. This line isn't scripted as originally filmed. It's delivered in the moment, shaped by exhaustion and adrenaline. What audiences didn't know is how often iconic dialogue is born accidentally. Not planning, but instinct. Not calculation, but survival. And right here, go ahead and like and subscribe, because moments like this only exist when chaos meets creativity, and we're just getting started. Because the next facts go darker. The predator respects strength, but the film questions it. The creature follows rules. That detail is easy to miss, but it changes everything. The predator does not attack randomly. It observes, it evaluates, it waits, it bypasses those it deems non-threatening. What audiences didn't know is that this internal code wasn't just a monster detail. It was a thematic choice that reshaped the film's meaning. This isn't chaos, it's judgment. By giving the predator standards, the film quietly turns the hunt into a test. Not of muscle, but of adaptability. Strength without awareness fails. Confidence without learning collapses. The most heavily armed characters fall first, not because they're weak, but because they're rigid. Not mindless violence, but selection. Not cruelty, but assessment. The predator becomes a mirror. It reflects the limits of brute force and exposes the danger of believing power alone guarantees survival. What remains isn't dominance, but evolution. The film doesn't ask who is strongest. It asks who can change fast enough, and that question lingers long after the jungle goes silent. The final duel is stripped of all technology. The climax isn't stripped down by accident. It's dismantled on purpose. Weapons fail. Gadgets disappear. Advanced tools are lost to the jungle. What remains is movement, timing, and instinct. What audiences didn't know is that this wasn't just a visual reset. It was a philosophical one. The film removes modern advantage piece by piece. Not dominance through firepower, but survival through intelligence. Not technical superiority, but adaptability under pressure. By forcing the final confrontation into raw physical space, Predator rejects the idea that progress automatically equals safety. Technology attracts attention. It announces presence. It creates noise. And noise invites hunters. The duel becomes primal, not flashy, not heroic, just necessary. This is where the film quietly reframes heroism. Victory doesn't come from strength or equipment. It comes from observation, patience, and learning the enemy's rules. Progress doesn't save you here. Sometimes it's exactly what gets you noticed. The Predator's self-destruct is a statement, not a gimmick. The explosion isn't about spectacle. It's about control. What audiences didn't know is how deliberately the sequence is framed to feel ceremonial rather than reactive. The predator doesn't lash out. It doesn't panic. It chooses. Not defeat, but refusal. Not fear, but authority. The self-destruct isn't rage. It's resolve. The creature decides how the hunt ends and denies its opponent closure, trophies, or understanding. That choice elevates the predator beyond a typical antagonist. This isn't a monster cornered. It's a hunter maintaining agency. By ending its own hunt, the predator preserves its code. It refuses to be studied, defeated, or claimed. The explosion becomes a boundary, one last assertion of autonomy. What lingers isn't destruction. It's intention. The film suggests that true power isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about choosing the terms of loss. And that quiet control makes the predator more unsettling than any roar ever could. Test audiences are deeply divided. Early screenings split the room. Some viewers expect a familiar action structure and feel unsettled when the film pivots into isolation and dread. Others feel electrified by the shift. What audiences didn't know is how close the studio comes to smoothing that edge. Compromise is discussed. Tone adjustments are floated. The idea of making the film clearer enters the conversation. But clarity isn't the point. Discomfort is. The filmmakers resist the urge to explain too much or soften the transition. They trust the audience to follow the unease rather than fight it. That decision is risky, especially for a big studio release. Not reassurance but tension. Not comfort but uncertainty. The result is a film that refuses to settle into one genre, and that refusal becomes its strength. The discomfort forces engagement. Viewers lean forward instead of leaning back. What divides audiences initially becomes what defines the film. Predator doesn't seek approval, it earns endurance. The score is designed to feel like a warning. The music doesn't guide emotion, it alerts it. What audiences didn't know is how deliberately restraint is used in the score. Themes are minimal. Silence stretches longer than expected. When sound arrives, it doesn't soothe, it signals. Not melody but tension. Not reassurance but vigilance. The score teaches viewers how to watch the film. Silence becomes suspicious. Stillness feels unsafe. The absence of sound carries weight. It trains the audience to listen for what isn't there. This isn't background music. It's a warning system. By avoiding constant audio cues, the film denies emotional comfort. You're never told how to feel, only when to be alert. That choice heightens immersion and makes every quiet moment unstable. Once conditioned, the audience never relaxes again. The jungle may look still, but the score insists otherwise, and that lingering unease follows viewers long after the final note fades. The predator is rarely fully seen on purpose. Visibility kills fear. The filmmakers know this. What audiences didn't know is how many clear shots are deliberately removed. Not because they didn't exist, but because they explain too much. Full exposure reduces mystery, and mystery is the film's sharpest weapon. Not clarity, but suggestion. The monster becomes conceptual rather than literal. This restraint demands patience. It trusts the audience to engage actively instead of consuming passively. Fear doesn't come from what is shown, but from what is almost seen. The film quietly redefines the action hero. Confidence doesn't win. Adaptability does. What audiences didn't know is how intentionally the traditional action image is dismantled. Strength fails. Authority collapses. Certainty becomes a liability. Survival belongs to the character who learns fastest. Not invincible, but observant. Not commanding, but adjusting. The hero doesn't triumph through dominance. He survives through humility, by recognizing that the rules have changed and responding accordingly. That shift is subtle but radical for its era. The film removes the safety net of superiority. Victory isn't loud. It isn't clean. It's earned through trial, error, and awareness. The hero becomes less impressive physically and more compelling mentally. This reframing influences generations of action storytelling. The strongest character isn't the one who starts in control. It's the one who changes when control is gone. Studio marketing downplays the horror elements. Promotions emphasize muscle and explosions. Mystery stays hidden. What audiences didn't know is how carefully the campaign masks the film's true identity. This isn't deception, it's protection. The studio fears genre confusion. They worry audiences won't accept something that refuses to stay in one lane. So they sell familiarity. Not dread, but power. Not suspense, but spectacle. The strategy works, but incompletely. Viewers enter expecting dominance and encounter vulnerability instead. That surprise becomes part of the experience. Ironically, the very elements downplayed in marketing are what give the film endurance. The horror lingers. The uncertainty sticks. The genre blend becomes its signature. History proves the concern unnecessary. Audiences don't reject the hybrid, they embrace it. Sometimes, what studios fear most is exactly what audiences remember longest. The ending we see isn't the original ending. There is another ending, and it changes everything. In the original version, the predator's final moment reveals something unsettling, an unexpected awareness that reframes the hunt entirely. Test audiences react strongly, too strongly. What audiences didn't know is that the ending isn't removed for quality, but for tone. It shifts the film from triumph to ambiguity, from victory to reflection, not resolution but disturbance. The studio pulls back. They choose clarity over complication. The theatrical ending restores distance between hunter and hunted, but traces remain. Even without the original reveal, the final moments carry unease. Survival feels incomplete. The victory feels provisional. The cut ending lingers as a ghost, suggesting that understanding the predator might be more unsettling than defeating it. And sometimes what's removed speaks louder than what remains. Predator's legacy grows beyond the film. The creature doesn't stay contained. It escapes. What audiences didn't know is how many later films borrow Predator's structure: confidence, intrusion, reversal, adaptation. The pattern repeats across genres and decades. Not imitation, but influence. Not copying, but evolution. The jungle hunt becomes a template for stories about vulnerability, awareness, and shifting power. The film stops being a product of its era and becomes a warning. It teaches that dominance invites challenge, that certainty attracts disruption, that survival belongs to those who adapt, not those who assume. The predator endures because it represents a truth larger than its design. It's the fear of being observed, of being evaluated, of discovering that strength isn't enough. The legacy isn't the monster. It's the lesson. And that lesson still hunts modern storytelling, quietly, patiently, and without mercy. Predator survives because it embraces uncertainty. It isn't just about being hunted. It's about losing the rules you depend on and discovering who you are without them. If this changed how you see the film, drop a comment, hit subscribe, and remember, in the jungle, confidence is loud, but survival listens.